Here's one of the most persistent myths in history. Hernan Cortes conquered the Aztec Empire with 500 Spanish soldiers. This story gets taught like some kind of military masterpiece, brilliant strategy, superior weapons, maybe disease. And it's basically complete nonsense. The truth is far darker. Cortes didn't conquer anything. He exploited pre-existing class conflicts within Aztec society to get a subject population to do the actual conquest for him. He played general and advisor while indigenous warriors did the fighting and dying. And when we talk about what happened to all that Aztec gold and treasure, buddy, we're not talking about Spanish soldiers getting rich. We're talking about it flowing directly into the hands of Spanish bankers, crown officials and investors who financed the whole operation from Spain. The soldiers got wages and land grants. The system made a handful of elites wealthy. Let me start with the basic facts that get buried in most history books. The Aztec Empire in 1519 was not a monolithic state where everyone felt unified loyalty to the Emperor Montezuma. It was an empire built on extraction, the same way most empires are built. The Aztecs had conquered an enormous territory, and they extracted goods, labor, and sacrificial victims from subject peoples. Montezuma lived in a magnificent city, Tenochtitlan, where the nobility controlled all resources, maintained power through religious authority, and demanded tribute from everyone below them. The system was sophisticated. They taxed subjugated peoples. They demanded soldiers. They took young people for religious sacrifice. The class structure was rigid and brutal. Nobility, merchants, artisans, farmers, and slaves. There was constant tension in this system because extraction creates tension. You can't take everything from people and expect them to love you for it. Now, the people around Montezuma, the upper nobility, the war chiefs, the priests, they were invested in the Aztec power structure. But the subject peoples, my friend, they had a different perspective. They paid taxes in goods and people to a government they didn't choose. They were viewed as resources. Some subject territories had been under Aztec control for decades. The resentment had built up over generations. They were waiting for someone who could exploit their grievances, someone who could offer them liberation from the extraction. This is where Cortes becomes relevant. He arrived in 1519 with Spanish soldiers, horses, guns, and crucially, absolute willingness to lie, manipulate, and exploit whatever conflict he found. Cortes understood his situation clearly. He was outnumbered enormously. He had maybe 500 Spanish soldiers. Montezuma commanded an empire of millions. Direct military conquest through force was impossible. He couldn't fight his way to victory. So instead, Cortes did something far more calculated. He became a sophisticated political operator. He told Montezuma he represented a great emperor across the sea and wanted to establish diplomatic relations. He told the subject peoples he was their liberator, who would overthrow the oppressive Aztec system that had been extracting wealth from them for decades. He was basically running a con that would make a Wall Street executive blush, telling everyone what they wanted to hear while working toward his own advantage. The critical moment came when Cortes reached Tlaxcala, an independent state that bordered Aztec territory. His 500 Spanish soldiers were a command structure and a technological advantage. The conquest wasn't Spanish military genius. It was indigenous soldiers doing most of the fighting and dying. Tens of thousands of indigenous warriors recruited from dozens of subject peoples fought because they saw opportunity to overthrow their oppressors. This is the part that matters, buddy. Cortes won because he understood the economic and political tensions in Aztec society and exploited them ruthlessly. He didn't win through military superiority or technological advantage. He won by being the best political operator in the room. He understood that empires built on extraction create resentment among subject peoples. And when resentment is widespread enough and deep enough, empires can be turned against themselves by someone willing to exploit that resentment. The Tlaxcalans didn't fight for Cortes because they thought he was some liberator. They fought because they calculated that Spanish domination might be better than Aztec domination. They were hedging their bets. Other subject peoples joined as well. The Totonacs, tributary to the Aztecs, switched sides. The Otomi people also joined. As Cortes moved toward Tenochtitlan, his fighting force grew from 500 Spanish to thousands of indigenous warriors. By the time he reached the capital, indigenous warriors probably outnumbered Spanish soldiers 10 to 1. But Spanish chroniclers minimized the role of indigenous allies to make it look like a Spanish achievement. It was propaganda then, and we've been repeating it ever since. The real conquest was an indigenous rebellion channeled and organized by Cortes. Inside Tenochtitlan itself, class conflict also worked in Cortes's favor. Montezuma's nobility was fractured. Some supported him, others didn't. Some nobles saw the Spanish as opportunity. When the Spanish took Montezuma as a hostage, various factions had different reactions. Some nobles opposed Cortes. Others saw him as a potential new patron with different power structures and maybe more favorable terms. The system was unstable enough that military force alone couldn't save it. We also have to talk about Malinche, the indigenous woman who was Cortes's translator and advisor. She spoke multiple indigenous languages and understood indigenous politics in ways Cortes never could. Her advice was crucial to his success. Without Malinche, the conquest probably doesn't happen, but history either minimizes her role or turns her into a romantic figure. The reality is more complicated. She was navigating an impossible situation, using intelligence and translation as her only tools for survival. She was enslaved by one empire and working for another. She made choices that had enormous consequences for millions of people. She translated not just languages, but also cultures and political systems. She explained to Cortes which nobles might be turned, which subject peoples might rebel, how the tributary system actually worked. Her intelligence made the conquest possible. Without that intelligence, Cortes would have been helpless. That's a tragic reality that deserves complexity beyond the stories we tell. But here's what really matters for understanding this conquest. What happened to the wealth? The Aztecs had accumulated enormous quantities of gold, silver, jewels, and goods over centuries. When Tenochtitlan fell in 1521, all of it became Spanish property. You might think Spanish soldiers got rich, that each went home with chests of gold? Wrong. That's not how extraction systems work. The wealth flowed upward. Cortes reported the treasure to the Spanish crown. The crown took its share. Spanish investors took their cut. Cortes took his portion. The soldiers got wages and maybe land grants. The indigenous peoples who did most of the fighting and died in greatest numbers. They got subjugation under Spanish colonial rule, which extracted more resources more efficiently than the Aztec system ever had. This is the structure of colonial conquest. The soldiers and indigenous warriors take the risk. The capital owners back in Europe take the profit. It's been this way for centuries, and it still works the same way. The real gold flowed to Spanish bankers in Seville, to the Spanish crown, and to investors. It financed Spanish warfare in Europe and colonial expansion in the Americas. For ordinary soldiers, there was just a regular wage. Cortes got wealthy through land grants, and control of indigenous labor, but the systematic wealth extraction was a colonial system, not a soldier's fortune. The conquest of the Aztecs wasn't a military miracle. It was the exploitation of one system by a more aggressive system. The Aztecs extracted from subject peoples. The Spanish replaced that with their own system that extracted even more efficiently. Indigenous allies got liberation from Aztec tribute? No. They got Spanish colonial rule that extracted more systematically than the Aztecs ever had. The Spanish colonial administration was a machine designed to maximize extraction. It converted human labor and resources into wealth flowing to Europe. Soldiers got rich? No. They got wages and maybe some land. The wealth enriched Spanish bankers, investors, and the crown. That wealth rebuilt Spain after its civil wars and established Spain as a global superpower. Here's what I want you to remember. When you hear about conquests and empires falling, the real story is about money flows and power structures. Cortes wasn't a military genius. He was a manipulator who understood he didn't need to defeat the Aztec Empire militarily. He needed to exploit the people who already resented Aztec power. The empire fell because it was weakened from within by its own exploitation of subject peoples. Cortes showed up and channeled that opposition into conquest. And the gold that made Spain a superpower, it came from indigenous labor under Spanish control, not from Spanish swords. History isn't about individual genius or the triumph of civilization. It's about money flows and who controls extraction systems. When you understand that, the myth of 500 men defeating millions becomes not a miracle, but a lesson in exploiting an empire's internal contradictions. Empires built on extraction contain the seeds of their own destruction.